Nord Stream 2, the president was pretty confident yesterday that it would not go forward if Russia invaded Ukraine, even though the German chancellor would not say that. So I guess logistically speaking, how would the president ensure that that would not happen?
I'm just not going to get into more specifics from here, but I can assure you that that is a commitment and one we will deliver on.
Would that include sanctions on anyone or any company that does business with the pipeline? What does that look like?
I understand why you're asking. I just don't have more details I can outline from here at this point.
In hindsight, does he regret waiving sanctions on the company behind Nord Stream 2 as the administration did last year?
Well, Nord Stream 2 is not operational at this point in time.
But does he
And it remains a point of leverage.
Could it quickly become operational?
Well, it's not, the German regulators have not approved it. So it's not operational. It hasn't been. So I don't think we're looking in the rearview mirror. I think we're looking at it as a point of leverage with the Russians.
But I guess the question is that Putin has been quite aggressive in his stance with Ukraine. He's amassed over 100,000 troops on their border. He clearly is seeking to use leverage over them. So why let the pipeline go forward at all, regardless of an invasion, given the tactics that he's been using?
We believe that it is a point of leverage and that making clear it will not proceed if Russia invades is a point of leverage. That's why we're proceeding on the path we are.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it. I made it clear from day one, when the federal government spends taxpayers' dollars, we're going to buy American. He's a grown man. He is the smartest man I know. I mean, in sort of pure intellectual capacity. To innovative younger companies like Rivian, building electric trucks, or Proterra, building electric buses, which I saw at a virtual tour last year when I met with the CEO virtually, and they really impressed me.
Why couldn't Chancellor Scholz say the words Nord Stream pipeline? He was asked numerous times, not just in the press conference yesterday, but also later in interviews. Why? Why can't he spit out the words that President Biden said?
Well, here's what I can speak for, which is the U.S. government, of course, and President Biden.
I know your position. I'm just asking if you could give us any insights into why Germany can't say that.
You are a very industrious reporter, Mara, and I'm sure you can pose that question to the Germans as well. But I can only speak for our government, and those barrels are contracted for delivery, including a 13 million that we just released in January. So it wasn't that 50 million released at once. They're continuing to be released. We saw a drop in prices, which fell more than 10 cents a gallon in the course of the holiday season after some of that initial release, and all options remain on the table.
After action report on the Abbey-Gate investigation, it's incredible what is in this report. Some of the military officials say things such as, the Department of State did not get one message right to the Afghans during the NEO. Marines at Abbey-Gate were forced to play God by identifying who would be allowed into the airfield. One of the reasons you do an after-action report, as you said, is to go back and assess, but isn't it also to allow for accountability? Does the president intend to seek any accountability?
I think we're going to allow a discussion internally to continue about any after-action report. I have no predictions beyond that at this point.
That report did paint a pretty damning picture of the NSC and State Department pretty much having blinders on while generals sounded the alarm over Afghanistan. But we're hearing sort of the same bleak, blunt assessments right now from the Pentagon about Ukraine. So is there any closer relationship between the White House and Pentagon? Are the generals being listened to differently now, post-Afghanistan, post this report?
Well, I think it's really important to separate the two, because first, we are not in a 20-year war with U.S. troops in Ukraine. That's a very different circumstance. Russian troops building up is not the same as ending a 20-year war. That is something the president had talked about for some time.
When are we going to hear from the CDC on this guidance? California yesterday changed their guidance. Randy Weingarten, Teachers Union, is vocally asking for the White House and the CDC to weigh in. So when are we going to hear from the CDC about updating the guidance on masks?
You'll have to ask the CDC.
Among the criticisms from military commanders in the document is that as late as early August of last year, the NSC quote, appeared to lack a sense of urgency about planning for an evacuation because it would signal that we have failed. What's your reaction to that criticism?
So I would just say if you look back at the specific planning steps we took, we did plan for a range of contingencies. Even well, as we talked about at the time, there wasn't an anticipation that that the Afghan National Security Forces would fall as they did or as quickly as they did, and that was not anticipated by anyone. But we still had done a range of contingency planning.
So broadly, then, do you reject the assertion that was made by various military commanders in this report that they were trying to convince members of the administration of the urgency of planning for the evacuation, but that they were rebuffed?
Well, again, there was a range of contingency planning that was about a lot during the period of August and September, that the Afghan National Security Forces would fall at the pace they fell. But if you look back at the history of what we actually did and what planning was done, there was a range of planning. We always look back and assess, but I would say the facts of what was planned for at the time show that we were preparing for a range of contingencies.
He resigned, he was not fired. How does this comport with President Biden's pledge to fire you, quote, on the spot if he found out about any kind of mistreatment of employees?
Dr. Eric Lander met with senior members of our officials who made clear what steps needed to be taken and that he would be required to be compliant with those. So that was actually an implementation of the president's commitment.
On the spot after an investigation.
Well, I think in any workplace, and one where, like the White House, you need to have a process and a process through which.
But I'm not joking when I say this. If you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot. On the spot. No ifs, ands, or buts. Everybody. Everybody.
It's been postulated here in town that perhaps Dr. Lander would still be working for this administration if Politico hadn't reported the story yesterday morning and if reporters in this room hadn't asked about it yesterday. Is that a fair assessment?
Given that Dr. Lander made the decision himself to submit his resignation, that would be a question best posed to him.